Well, welcome back to Mr. Rodder's neighborhood. We got our boots on and we're ready to do some work. It's been a while since I made a video. I've just been kind of wrapped up trying to get the everything done for the winter time, and some other things fell in my lap. But other than that, just been working pretty hard trying to get things done. I'm going to take a break from engine building for a few minutes, and we're going to get onto a project I've been kind of squirreling off to the side for a couple of years, and it's really getting on my nerves that I have never been able to get to this thing. And that's my super stock 63 Buick Special Skylark. Today I've got it pushed in the shop here. I got most of the things kind of disassembled just to see where we're at and what we got to do. And I'll give you the rundown on what I'm doing here and how things look. I needed to get it down to pretty much bare bones so I could see what to do from this point forward, because there's a lot of changes and modifications I got to make this thing work as designed, I guess. It was never this way, so but you'll see. Follow along. We'll get the car built up and hopefully have it at the Buick Nationals in May, if possible. But it all depends on money and time and what it takes to get something together. So I'm going to get the camera flipped around and I'm going to show you what I'm working on now. Okay, this was my 1963 Buick Special Skylark. I call it that because the Skylark is just a variant of the Special. It really was just like a trim package, and then you could get the hotter motor and stuff in it, which this one had the hot 215. But I've been working on it for little pieces here and there for the past couple of years, and finally I just said, F it. I'm going to push it in the garage. I want to get this thing done and going, and I'd like to have it at the Buick Nationals this year. But so without further ado, I'll give you the rundown on the car. The car is actually based, it's a Y-body. It's based off the Corvair platform. The F-85 Oldsmobile and the Pontiac Tempest are also the same kids in the family. So you can see that there's some similarities between the Corvair in here, but also the Oldsmobile and the Buick were the only ones that were rear-wheel drive. The rest of them, like the Corvair, of course, was rear engine and rear drive, and the Pontiac was front engine with a torque tube and had a transaxle in the rear. Now, a lot of the Tempests were used in super stock drag racing, but no one ever used a Buick. I don't know why. And it had a hot little 215 in it that could probably run pretty good for weight to cubic inch numbers. And so I decided, why not try a Buick since no one's ever done it? The reason why I chose the 63, I thought the 63 looked better than the 62 and 61, but now that I'm more messing with them, I think the 62 actually looks better. But really, 63 was also the year, if you know your drag racing history, General Motors pulled out of drag racing, right? So there was no factory-supported drag racing coming from General Motors. Well, in this car's case, you know, you never really saw one at the drag strip. It wasn't until they started getting the 300 cubic inch motor in them in the 64 model where they actually started doing something that was, in my opinion, pretty fantastic with their little 4-speed and 300 cubic inch Buick. But this thing it's fairly clean. I got it out of Southwest Texas. So a lot of it's rust free. There is some rust spots I'll show you here in the floor. I got this little rust spot here underneath that bracket for the seat, which I determined that somebody actually put in here so they could put bucket seats in the car. You can see where they welded it to the floor. General Motors didn't do it that way. It would have been spot welded. So no big deal, because I'll give you the rundown on what's supposed to happen here. It's hard for me to put the T10 4-speed that I want to use, the Power Brute Super T10, and in this car, because the transmission tunnel is so small. It's made for that little dual path 2-speed, and there's just not enough room for the bell housing, for the clutch linkage, for everything. So the plan is I got to cut that transmission tunnel out. And I'm going to put one in there from probably a GM B-body or G-body or whatever I could find in the junkyard. Maybe even an A-body, who knows. But So you come around here to the front. So I got everything stripped out of the way. I mean, remember, it's going super stock drag racing, so it doesn't need any of this stuff that would have came in there, windshield wipers and all that crap. I mean, there's going to be a new master cylinder going in there because, I mean, you have to have brakes, but the vent ducting, everything that was in here before, gone, right? So I took it all out, and I'm just trying to get it down to bare bones and get it cleaned up so that, you know, it looks somewhat presentable. I mean, this thing, you can tell, sat for a long time. Tony and I found that some paperwork on it from 2001, so that means it sat for about 20 years, and it had been somewhat refurbished by someone, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. But so the transmission tunnel being too small, you can see that the air box was here for your ducting for your like heater and fans and all that stuff. Okay, so I have to cut all that out, the transmission tunnel, and raise it up so that there's enough room to get that Mongo 4-speed bell housing on my Super T10 there in that transmission tunnel. Okay, now the other thing that, like I said, somebody had semi-refurbished it before is you come back here, and of course the interior, this is the problem with getting a car out of the Southwest. You'll get a really nice car with good sheet metal, which is what I needed if I wanted to use this 63 Buick, because they don't reproduce anything for it. Nothing. Absolutely zero. Okay? And the interiors are usually fragged when it comes out of like Southwest. They're burned up and then they're split and stuff like this. And this one had the windows down for 20 years. So the interior was really gooned up in it. But surprisingly, the floors weren't really bad because the windows were down. And that's because it was in Southwest Texas. But here's the thing I said, you know, like somebody pseudo restored it. Okay, so you come back here, and the rear bumper was really damaged. I tried straightening it out. I did a pretty good, well, no, I didn't do a pretty good job. It was pretty effed up. So, but you look at this panel back here, and it's been crunched at one point in time. Okay, and I don't know if you can tell by this angle, but here's a pretty good angle that's going to show you how bad this thing is. All right, so this side was not damaged. Okay, you can see where the tail light, and then there's a bezel that goes on the back, fits flush. Okay, you come over here to this side. Let's see if I can get a good angle of this. All right, this side here is bulged out. Okay, it's actually sticking out about 1/2 of an inch to maybe an inch, and then there's like probably 1/4 inch of Bondo right here on this one bolt hole. Now, if you go over to this other side, there's no Bondo at this hole. Okay, now maybe a little bit, maybe a skim coat, but it's been damaged, and I'm not a body man by any means. I mean, you can see here, big wrinkle. And this is a drag car, so it's good from afar and far from good. So you can see all the Bondo. This is terrible. I mean, whoever did this like had to be in their backyard just trying to get it somewhat straight and not give any F's at all because there's a panel over it, right? But it made the panel all wonky looking, and it actually stuck out on one side and was bulged. But all I'm going to do is try to straighten it. And like I said, I'm not a body man, and I don't have a lot of patience for this kind of stuff. And it is going to be hidden behind that panel. But if I can get the taillight somewhat straight, I found out, you know, I'm like, hey, I wonder why this taillight looks funky. Well, that's because the bracket's not even attached inside there. It like literally pushes. So someone broke the spot welds just to put the taillight in, and that's a no bueno. So I'm going to get that somewhat straightened out and probably tack back into place so that I can mount the taillight properly. But this back panel, I'm going to try to straighten as best as possible. I'll probably knock some of that Bondo off, and then and straighten it as best I possibly can. And I'll probably do stuff that people hate, like use a 2x4 for a backing piece and just try to smash it up against the 2x4 and get it straightened out somewhat. But All right, so, and here's parts and pieces that have been taken off the car. All right, so this side is actually pretty good. I have all of the trim that needs to go on the car so it'll look correct from the outside. And I'm gonna go back with the same paint scheme. I'm not gonna sand it down and paint it. I know some people probably think that it deserves a really awesome paint job, but the idea here is I'm trying to get away with as little time that I have to get this done. And the way to do that is you got to cut some corners that are important and some of them that are not, right? And not painting it is pretty important because it'll take up a lot of time to paint it with very little return. So I'm going to try to bring some of this paint back to life. Most of the gold I'm going to try to bring back to life. The top, some kids or somebody have jumped on it and it's been dented in here at the top. I'm going to try to heat that with a torch and push it out and try to get it as round or straight or whatever it is as possible. And then I'm just going to paint it back white. Okay, I'm just going to put new white on it, straighten the roof because it will look bad with a big dip in the roof. But since I'm going to do this in white, I decided I'm just going to do the trunk lid. It's got scrapes in it where somebody tried to draw a picture in it. It was an abandoned car, so don't think somebody was jacking somebody's car up. It was an abandoned car, and that's how I ended up with it. So who knows, maybe Mike and his Dirty Mike and the boys climbed in there and had an F-shack. I don't know, but it's definitely a piece. Okay, so it was perfect for what I wanted to do, which was we're just going to go nostalgia drag racing with this thing. I try to, the goal is to run it in the Southeast Gas or Superstock class. I don't know if I'll get there just because the rules are so strict that it requires specific parts that I don't already have. I have to go out of my way and buy them. Now I have some interesting things to do with the brakes. The wheels, if you notice, are this weird 4-lug pattern they're really hard to come by wheels for this thing. The pattern there is like, I don't know, 4 on 4.5, something like that. It's some funky size. It's not the same as a 5-liter Mustang, which I thought would be pretty cool if I had 5-liter Mustang parts that I could use with this. But no, I'm not so much lucky on that. So the Pontiac Tempest came with a 5-lug pattern, but it was like a 5-on-4, and it's again its own weird size. It's something like that. It's 5-on-4. I don't know, but what I found out is the hubs are the same as a 67 to 69 Camaro or an early Nova. So I'll just change the hubs out, have 5-lug in the front. This is where it gets away from the rules for Southeast Gassers initially, and I can always buy a set of wheels afterwards. But I have these pretty awesome Super Tricks that I was going to use, and I thought would be kind of era correct somewhat for a car of this this lifetime. And then again, okay, the super stock motor, if you haven't noticed, I moved it from a stand and it's up on the start stand now. It does run. Let me fire this sucker up. I have got it more dialed in. I had to go up 3 jet sizes to get it somewhat close. It is pretty close to the garage door, so I'll pass on firing it up. But trust me, it runs, and I'll have it to the dyno here in just about a week and a half. We're going to find out what kind of numbers it makes. The Mule 300, I had a setback on it because I got the wrong flywheel from Rock Auto. They're calling out the LUK 131 flywheel as the correct flywheel. So I bought one. I spent 4.5 hours trying to put it on. I couldn't figure out why it wouldn't mount. And it's because it's for a Chevrolet small block. Go figure. So I have to find the correct flywheel for the Mule motor. So it won't be going to the dyno at the same time. But so back to this, the things that we got to do. So I know I got to cut the floor out. I got this paint stripped off here in the front so that I could see the spot welds, and I could drill the spot welds at the pinch there where where the floor meets the firewall and save as much as of the actual firewall as I could, and just make the transmission tunnel bigger. So that's why all the paint is knocked off there, so I could get to the spot welds, drill them, and then cut the floor out with a death wheel. The other things are, okay, I do have to fabricate a set of headers. That's what these are for. These are actually Oldsmobile headers. I'm gonna cut them all up and make them fit. Let's see, okay. So I had to take everything out in here, steering column, the whole 9 yards. I've got to go to manual steering. This was a power steering car. So quickly, I'll just run up here and show you. Okay, here's the power steering box. This was actually kind of an oddity because a lot of them didn't come with power steering. A lot of them came with manual steering. Well, Eric Jensen, who is a Oldsmobile F85 guy with his Jetfires, he had the stuff to change it over to manual steering. So that's a manual steering box over there. That's the Z-bar and everything to put the 4-speed linkage in it. And here is my clutch pedal assembly. Now, I have the entire clutch pedal assembly. Get off there. All right. I have the clutch pedal assembly, but I don't have the bracket that goes to the that holds the column and the clutch pedal assembly. But I do have the factory one, which if I can get it untangled here. All right, I have the factory one here, and I did notice that it's virtually the same thing, just narrower, right? So I'm going to try to fabricate my own crap here to hold the clutch pedal assembly and linkage for the brake and clutch pedal assembly. So that's one thing I have to do. Since it was a power steering car and I got to go to this manual rack, normally you got to get some pieces to make that work. Well, I did that as well. So I got the steering column out of the automatic car. You can see the shifter there. I'm going to swap this shaft in to this steering column, and that'll allow me to run the manual rack, or the manual the manual steering box. Okay, the neat thing about the manual steering box is it's aluminum, so I'm going from a cast iron one to an aluminum box, which lightens up the whole car. All right, so speaking about lightening car, all right, here's the reason why the 63 Buick Special. You know, there's a lot of reasons why not. Nobody makes parts for it. Nothing fits in there easily. You got to cut the floor out, blah, 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 blah. Okay, this car curb weight from the factory, remember this thing was based on the Corvair, was 2,350 pounds with a Buick 215 in it. Okay, so I'm starting off with the lightest possible car you could start with. The less weight you got to take down the track, the less fuel you burn, the less hard it is on the car or on the drivetrain or the engine or whatever. All right, so the other thing is this rear end. I don't know if we got room to slide in here. I'll show you the rear end suspension assembly on this car. Okay. All right, just your regular live rear axle, just like anything newer. But the suspension actually is set up like a triangulated 4-link like they used on the GM A bodies from like 64 to 72, with the exception of the spring. The spring is like a GM B body of that generation, where the spring is actually attached to the lower control arm and it's not mounted on the rear housing of the axle. So that makes this rear suspension almost exactly like a 5-liter Mustang, which, woohoo, you can get them suckers to hook on dirt if you really do some work. I have to use the factory suspension pieces for this super stock class, so that means I'll probably have to box the lower and upper control arms so that they have some kind of strength and rigidity. But and this rear end is a 6 3/8. It will have to come out and go in the trash. What I'm going to do is use it to have a rear end fabbed up, and the rear end that I'm using hasn't got here yet, but it'll be here next week. It's an 8 3/4 Chrysler.
Okay, now some of you might be asking, why not a 9-inch Ford? Why not blah, 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 12 volt or 8.8 or whatever have you. Now, remember, I told you I wanted to take this thing to the Buick Nationals first. The Nationals is held at Bowling Green, Kentucky, which is a quarter-mile track. So I need to have a quarter-mile gear, and I need to have an 1/8 mile gear. That's the whole idea, is just have 2 different gear sets. So I needed a front loader rear end, which was a 9-inch Ford or an 8 3/4 Chrysler. So, let me see if I can turn this off. Okay, with the 8 3/4 Chrysler, they're not as power hungry as a 9-inch Ford. You're looking at, I don't know, probably 20 horsepower difference between the two. And then the 8 3/4 is what they use in top fuel dragsters. So it's probably healthy enough that it's going to handle some clutch dumps from a small block Buick. Now, for you savvy Buick folks, those frame mounts right there are like the world's worst design to try to put some kind of serious power through. Remember, it was meant for a 215 cubic inch Buick that probably made 250 foot-pounds of torque. We're going to go to double that probably. I'm assuming the motor's probably going to make 500 horse and 550 foot-pounds of torque or something. So we will definitely find out. Also, these headers won't be able to go on there because they're for a 64 to 72 A body. And so I'm going to have to fabricate my own headers to make it work in that car. But that's no different than anything else I've already done. I've already fabricated an oil pan. I built the whole dang motor, made my own valve covers. So I do have it dialed in somewhat. Here's my parts pile from stuff that's crap. And so that's it. That's kind of where I'm at today. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them down below. Like and subscribe and follow if you want to check this thing out, because it's going to take a little while for me to build it, probably a few months, probably more like a year, but who knows. Like I said, I'm shooting for the Buick Nationals, May of 2023, and hopefully we'll have this thing ready to go. Now, I've already picked out a name for it, but I'll wait till I get some kind of lettering done on it, because it is pretty bitchin'. So stay tuned.